So I wanted to start with this painting, rather large drawing. It's 17 feet across. It's graphite with a related sculpture that has sound. And it's called About Midnight Saturday. And the reason I want to start with it is it's the first of my work where I developed the imagery based on an interview. So I interviewed my father, my sister and I interviewed our father, Skip Bollinger, about an event in his life that had been, in a way, a kind of family myth. In 1970, on Christmas night, actually, he and a friend were coming home from a double date, going to the friend's house to a party. They passed a car that was driving really slowly on the road, and that car proceeded to kind of follow them home, drag racing style. And when they pulled up at the house, my father walked out of opened the door to his car, went to the passenger side of this unknown vehicle. They rolled their window down, and without a word, stabbed him in the chest with a knife. Don't worry, he's okay. He's actually here today. But it was, of course, a very traumatic event. They never found the assailants. It shaped, I think, in a lot of ways, my father's life. And so being the child of a person who has gone through that became a story that I was highly familiar with, and it became kind of part of the myth of what my father was. And so from the interview, I constructed the drawing entirely based on his accounts and research based on those accounts. So it wasn't until after I'd completed the drawings that I actually had him drive me to the scene of the crime, basically. We retraced that night. So in doing that research, I had to investigate all the information about the type of car and try to kind of rebuild that experience. It was important to me to not have the figures present because there was this cabinet speaker, which was a replica of one that he had at the time, and his 8-track player that was in the Camaro. That within that, hidden inside the sculpture, is a little MP3 player. So you could go and you could listen to my father talking about this event, and then look at this large drawing and sort of mentally project. Your imagination would function as a kind of projector, and you could project these events onto this large backdrop-like drawing. Which brings me to one of the pieces that's in the show, which is called Storage. This is not the same Camaro, but a very similar Camaro. He will, of course, be very particular about the previous one was a 1970 Camaro. This one's 1974. And it's presently sitting in his garage in this state, and I'm embarrassing him slightly to say this. But I was interested that here was this kind of heroic object that's sort of a co-actor in this very dramatic story that happened to him. But also a kind of emblem of youthful dreams and passions, and his love of cars, now sitting in a state of relative disrepair. And I became interested in the way that the Camaro was a kind of surrogate for him. So I could think about him but look at the car, and think about family and look at the car. And so in thinking about the car and bodies and thinking about vulnerability, I thought, well, I need to open the hood. So I made this. This is a smaller painting. It's 5 feet tall, but the engine is close to life size. And I thought, well, what's the heart of the car? Well, it's going to be the engine. So I opened it up to kind of look at all the pipes and ventricles of the machine. This painting, not all of my paintings come directly from that family story. A lot of it comes from my own autobiography and my own experience, things that I've seen or things that I've directly done. And a few years ago, for years I drove around in this old Toyota Tacoma pickup truck, and it was really important to me that everything I did could roll up and fit in the truck. So like the whole studio could collapse into these special boxes. They'd fit in the trunk. The paintings could roll up, all of them on one roll, an entire show. That could fit into the back of the truck. And then I had to sell the truck because I got married. And we both couldn't. We had 2 cars suddenly. We live in Brooklyn, so that's a disaster. So I sold it to a friend. So he's taking good care of Clover, my sweet truck. But I thought to memorialize our separation that I would paint it kind of getting away, but that's not necessarily something that I would need you to know when you're in a gallery looking at it. What's more important is that there's this barrier between you, the audience, and this vehicle where something's going to happen. You can tell it's in the middle of happening. The bolt cutters are there. The chain has been cut. And I feel like these barriers are ways to situate you as an audience person in relationship to this fiction I want to create. Because my paintings are all fundamentally in some way narrative. They're a glimpse of a piece of a story. This is a large diptych drawing. It's the same size as the diptych in the gallery, so each page is 8 feet tall and 6 feet wide. And in the summer of 2015, I interviewed my mother, and I became really fascinated in the places that she and my father lived and did things before I was born. And so I interviewed her all about her apartment in Independence, Missouri, where she moved to after she finished physical therapy school and was just starting her first kind of real adult job. And in thinking about it, I realized that this is actually the first time she hadn't lived with roommates, I believe. So it was kind of entirely her space. And I wanted to make a drawing that felt like the inside of the room was sort of the inside of her imagination or her mind. So you can kind of see her on this left side in kind of shadow or silhouette. And then the rest of the space is kind of unnaturally animated, like gusts of wind are kind of blowing through and setting everything in motion. And I was actually drawing it very much like an animation. I would draw and move things to kind of convince myself that they could be blown around. But this too was constructed out of small detailed elements based on her account. Some of these objects I've actually had direct experience with. So when I was 18, I took this stereo and never gave it back. I know that very well, along with that Otis Redding album that's down below. It's fantastic, Mom, thanks. But others I had to construct entirely from her accounts and then kind of Google searching for things. As I was thinking about that space and talking with her more about it, it came out that she actually met my father in the apartment complex where that apartment was, and then when they got married, they moved into the apartment next door to the apartment she had been living in, and the only difference being that it had one more bedroom. So I became fascinated with this, what had been a kind of interior mental space becoming a place of meeting between the two of them. And I don't typically think about art historical references and things when I'm making my stuff, but as I started this, I realized, oh, this is like a marriage portrait, which was a little weird, because it's like the origin of Matt. So this painting was developed out of that same interview, plus some follow-up questions, except this time, of course, constructed out of paint. And I like to show these details because it's bizarre to see it blown up like that, but you can see some of the textural qualities that are even hard to see with the naked eye. So there's my father behind the door and my mother reflected in the panes of glass. And I was talking to someone earlier in the galleries about the way the color changes the kind of the timbre, the flavor of the work. And I'm interested in things like Hollywood melodramas. This is a still from Douglas Sirk's All That Heaven Allows. That's Rock Hudson and Jane Wyman. And I realized as I was putting this together and I was looking through my archive that I borrowed that window. And I was also interested that these objects would be kind of stand-ins for them. I deliberately didn't put them in the space because I want the space to be a kind of theatrical backdrop. To hang like an empty stage that you, the audience, get to come and populate. But I wanted the objects to be there in a way to kind of speak for the absent characters, in this case, my parents. So there's the Rolling Stones album. There's also the beer can. So that's on her side. On his side is Carole King's Tapestry, and the two cigarettes, you know, the kind of nestled together in a sort of almost kissing. And the final work I want to show and talk about is called Dad's Home Office. And I've done a number of paintings that were based on the small business that my father had in Independence, Skip Speed and Sport, Skip Bollinger. And he sold auto parts. He was an auto parts retail store that was eventually pushed out of business by big box store competition. And I have related pieces that are based on interviews from that. But I felt like I'd been looking at their domestic spaces before I was born, and I was thinking about the way that this was the kind of counterpoint to the Camaro, which was maybe a dream of the kid that went out and drag raced illegally on the street a bit, maybe too much, in his early 20s, and then formed that dream into something real that he's continuing to this day. And the way that that could be encapsulated by something as simple as a chair and a computer. The chair is a kind of stand-in, you know, this is where he was sitting and where it's sort of waiting for him to be, the cigarette's still smoking. And then all of the kind of emblems of his current life, family photographs, the different kinds of auto enthusiast memorabilia as well. That's it for me.
I will start and echo some of the sentiments from Matt. I'm very honored to be here and speaking with you guys. Not something I would have thought about not even 5 years ago when I was working still as a live-in nanny, which is what I'm starting with as an example here of a day in my job. My family came from Mexico and they moved to the San Bernardino, California area, and I'm born and raised there, then eventually went to school, art school, CalArts, and that didn't work for me. I ended up dropping out for various reasons, and also ended up exploring some of this arts life, jumping around different couches, living in very unstable situations. I felt very unstable at that period, and I needed stability. So out of nowhere, this job came about. I had a lot of childcare experience, and this nanny job was offered to me around that time that I dropped out. So I said, you know what, it's a free home in the Hollywood Hills, and what could be better? I took it out of necessity, but what ended up happening was this job seemed to be the art school part that was missing. In other words, it slowly became obvious to me that it was put in my life, and this experience came into me in order for me to make connections between my family's experience, working in jobs similar to what I was doing. I was not necessarily intended to be a nanny either. My family worked hard, they sacrificed a lot, and for me to end up doing exactly what they were doing was what my mom said, not the plan, you know? But again, here I was. So this is a day in my life a few years ago in 2012, and I was babysitting at the time the twins that I raised from when they were 6 weeks old. So my nanny's job started in 2009 when they were only about 6 weeks old, and by this point they were already about 2.5 years old, 3 years old. That's an interesting thing to me, that time started happening. And again, if you look at the close-up of them, they're just sort of playing and drawing, but in the back, there's this man that would come in, and he would come and clean the pool, reminding me a lot of my own family members. Every Thursday, in fact, all these pictures that I'm showing you are from a Thursday afternoon, the housekeepers, the cleaners, the pool cleaners, such as this guy, would come in and work. And it's interesting because I was the only one out of all of them that was actually living there. But yet, what does it mean to live there? What does it mean to come in and take care of a space that you're not really a part of? At the same time, it made me confront my own things. Am I a part of this? Is this what is intended for me? So here, again, the pool cleaner coming in reminded me a lot of my parents, but then the housekeepers, are also their own individuals, and they have their own families, and they have their own kids to take care of. So that's why they're there. And seeing these interactions, these connections between everyone, from the people inside working with me to the people outside, like the gardener here, Candelario, that's what started informing my work. And again, it wasn't an art project, but little by little, the neighborhood, Laurel Canyon area of the Hollywood Hills, the fact that I was working for an entertainment industry family, editor in TV shows that many of you probably watch, like Criminal Minds or True Blood. That kind of part of Hollywood is well known and documented through work such as the iconic work of David Hockney, who you may already know of through all those great works that have been exhibited. But at the same time, I didn't become very familiar with him until this period when I started looking at his paintings in a very different way. I didn't see Candelario reflected in his paintings, though. I didn't see that pool cleaner. I didn't see that housekeeper. So what I ended up doing was looking at his painting in a very different way and deciding what's so clear in my head needs to be clear to everybody else. So I came there with that intention. This is actually the original version, not the one that's downstairs, but this is the original version I did on a smaller wood panel that's made from, or that's sourced from wood that's used to build the sets of TV shows. So anyway, I'm really engaging with that Hollywood aspect there, but more so I'm engaging with art history, I'm engaging with an iconic artist, and I didn't want it to be karaoke. So by replacing that splash, seeing the splash originally be his sole focus, the ephemeral moment of a splash, made me think about the ephemeral moment of labor, the ephemeral moment of somebody coming in, working, and all that's left is this spotless home. So replacing them was key in this series. The piece downstairs is what it is, no splash, at the scale of the original painting. It is my hope that one day No Splash is exhibited next to a bigger splash by David Hockney. That's just throwing it out there for anybody that would be interested. But I'm honored that it's down here because, again, these are experiences in Los Angeles that aren't very far removed from experiences here or elsewhere. No matter where in the world you go, labor is happening. The cast is different, but the roles are the same. Then going into further past No Splash, I wanted to go further with more of David Hockney's work. And of course, there was lots of paintings that called for me immediately, such as this one, his iconic portrait of the art collectors, Fred and Marcia Weissman. And in that painting, it was easier for me to think about where to place the figure when the figures were already there. But what wasn't easy was how to insert them into this painting. I thought originally of them working, but then I thought, you know what? The power of them replacing them specifically in the same positions, owning the space, confronting the viewer, the scale of it. The figures are very different when they're larger, closer to life size, which are connected to other works that I've done. When the figures are actually more closer to real life and they're standing there guarding you or watching you, you're almost confronted by this reality that exists, that gets hidden, especially in the context of art. So here, the reflection of a moment in an imaginary scenario, these aren't really the art collectors' gardeners, but they're not much different from the ones that actually exist out there. That was key for me. You also see different layers. David Hockney, for example, when he painted this, he was interested in the tension between the couple that existed, whereas I'm not necessarily interested in the tension between the couple. I'm interested in the male couple there that does happen. Lots of male will work together. Sometimes uncles bring their friends, or there's a lot of relationships that develop in the gardener work that exist, and they're there together for an afternoon, and then they move on. So there is a connection between these two men, but it's a little different. I leave it for you as the audience to explore that. One of the things that is not intended, but is part of the project, is as it's going on, it's been now inserted into Google History, which I actually love, just because that little moment that someone might be searching the David Hockney painting, then seeing mine, might pick their interest and then see something that they might not have thought about before, pushing what David Hockney's work means and actually exploring it further, not just staying on the surface. Speaking of surfaces, I'm very interested in not just David Hockney work and mimicking him, but I'm also interested in reflecting Los Angeles itself, very similar to him. That's just natural. It's a very beautiful location to walk around and see these different shops. And this is basically the original version of what's downstairs called Paul Smith's store. It's an iconic fashion store. And unlike the domestic work that I was doing with the Hawking series, this is just making you connect domestic labor with just labor in general. The guy that comes in and sweeps and maintains that building. The original is a very small scale, but didn't have the logo. And then the second painting, the painting you see downstairs, included the logo and a nod to pop art. Definitely Ed Ruscha with the lines, definitely Andy Warhol with the logos. I see myself very much in line with them, but at the same time, what pop art does is focus on very almost surface things, surface details, things that are very easy to dismiss or just look at as something like a pop song and then move on. But here I'm asking you to look at it, which is why I use the strategies of pop art, but then it's connected to the social realists. It's connected to all kinds of other artists that explored what it meant to exist and work in that time and period, and then looking at it from the course of history when we're not here, and I'm not here anymore to share with people what my work is about, letting the paintings speak for itself to document something that existed now. With that painting, something that's happened is a manager at the Paul Smith store is a Guatemalan American, and he found my work online, shared it with Paul Smith himself, and now has been taking pictures of the guy that takes care of that logo in that store. And so he sends that to me, and that's developing as well. I'm thinking, okay, what does that mean to have that kind of effect out in the world? You know, it's one thing for people to come and see the paintings, and another thing for someone to look at my work, see it, take a photo, and then share it back to me. So I'm still in that process of collecting these photos that people send to me, but I don't know, it's just something really strong about the fact that this guy now shares it on his social media feed, and he's sharing it with that designer, and that designer is openly supporting the project. These guys that work at the Paul Smith store also work in other storefronts on that iconic Melrose Avenue, such as Alexander McQueen, and they clean those stores for people to come in and buy something. So unlike the domestic labor, I think when I look at those paintings and I look at these magazines or these images on popular social media, I'm looking at it through Instagram feeds. I'm looking at it and trying to focus on how to bring these ideas into a lexicon or more of a contemporary feel. David Hawking did it his way one year, or in the years that he was doing it, continues to do so. I'm actually exploring it through, again, a different lens. Again, social media is a big influence to me because I share these images online, images of the people that are working, taking pictures of them that inform the work. As you saw the pictures of the kids that I was babysitting, that social media aspect is really interesting to me just because I'm able to let go of an idea, share it, and have immediate reactions. Again, the surface is what I'm interested in focusing on here, but I'm exploring it further. Here, the 10/6 logo is framing this sort of body that's not showing a head in front of this darker storefront talking about commodification and industries such as the fashion industry that are all about selling you something that you need right now, and it's all about giving you something that you're supposedly missing. But then after you buy something, it takes somebody else's maintenance, somebody else's labor to come in and take care of it for you. That's what I'm talking about when I talk about commodification, and definitely the industries that sell you something when at the same time it has real effect on humans elsewhere. And then the image I want to end with, actually, is one that brings me to the context of the museum itself as I move from being a nanny as I did into as an artist now. I'm still looking at the world in the same way. I'm still connecting the people that come in and clean to the people that were cleaning in that home with me. It's very personal. Similar to Matt, I come from my family who, again, work in these jobs. My mom is a custodian at elementary school, so when I see the custodians, it's actually closer to me now to make the connection between them cleaning in spaces like this museum or the museum here that I've painted called The Broad in Los Angeles, and then making sure that they get inserted into art history, getting inserted into spaces like this show here, so that people's stories, people's children in the future can go back and see their families reflected in a way that, again, I feel is closer to life. They're small. We're all small somewhere and small here. But at the same time, these ideas are bigger than just us. And this idea that I had way back when is definitely growing and bigger than me. So thank you again for having me here.
Hi. I also want to thank everyone here for having me and my work in this beautiful show, and it's a real honor. Now, let's see if I can figure this out. Right. I'm Ezra Johnson. I thought I would use this opportunity to focus on an aspect of my work I don't get to focus on as much, and so my sculptures, which I started back in like 2002. And this, I apologize, this isn't a great image. I never have been a great documenter of my work. But I see a thread that sort of carries through from this sort of first sculpture that I made back then, which actually was after doing a road trip down to, driving down to Miami from New York, for the Basel Fair, I used to work as an art handler, and I stopped at some kind of truck stop, and this is a product you can get around here. Or not around here, sorry, around, I think the Carolinas, but this is like a 4-foot version. And I started to make a bunch of sort of very common objects into sculptures, and these were made out of wood. And they were sort of like a homage to Klaus Oldenburg, except for they were sort of heavy and made out of wood, but many of them, I often, like, I would enjoy sort of playing with like different kinds of meat, and sort of realizing that when I would sort of paint the surface with color, that would have a transformative effect, and it would sort of like turn this thing. These are actually kind of heavy wooden objects, but then they started to feel like plastic or like foam or, yeah. Here's another one. So these are all from like the early 2000s. And this is a still from a video that's here, The Time of Tall Statues. And so my work, it always sort of originates with painting, or, you know, even though sculptures are very much dealing with the surface and color on the surface and sort of the transformation that happens. And one thing I wanted to highlight from this video is kind of like the combination of the painted flat surface and then the sculptural three-dimensional surface that I really kind of exploited in this piece. This is also a still from that same scene, but this still was taken before the previous still. And I made a giant painting of like the meat section of the supermarket, and but in order to make the animation work, I had to paint actually on the wall and on the floor. So you can kind of see that it gives this figure that I have passing through. You can sort of see the weird effect of the part of the figure, like the neck down, that's actually the floor, and it's sort of getting more light, and then the face is actually painted on the wall. And it's, if I remember right, it's about a 6-foot by 5-foot or so wall painting, and then it comes out on the floor about 3 feet. So it's a giant face, and basically, over the course of like a month, to make this sequence happen, I kind of walked different people in front of this scene, and then ultimately I blew it up, which I have a short excerpt that ends up with that here. So I'm going to try to get that to play. This is just about 3 minutes. How does this work?
This is great, honey. Wow, you see that river?
Wow, that is a great river.
Such a good idea. I'm so glad we came. I'm so glad we came for this drive. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, I think so too.
Hey, look at that house.
Oh yeah, that is a nice house. Wow. And the trees are so tall.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
The air smells great, and I love the light.
Yeah, I agree. It's so beautiful.
And that last bit was, it's a combination of like 3D animation and she's all painted on the wall, but then the child in the cart I sort of made out of a milk crate and spray foam and painted it. And this is also an image from that same video, The Time of Tall Statues. But I think it kind of relates to that sort of tie in my work between like the physicality of sculpture and painting, which is sort of, there's some kind of essence there that is really the most important thing to me. So this is the first mattress sculpture I made, and I made this in London in 2011, so pretty recently. And I had spotted, abandoned mattresses on the street and thought, like, those are kind of like abstract paintings there, but then they have, they're like a surrogate painting. They're rectangular and they're flat, and they often have kind of patterns like stripes or other kinds of abstraction on there. But I was sort of attracted to that they can slump, and they could almost be exaggerated into kind of a cartoony sort of representation. Like the gravity is like really, really heavy on them, and that was an aspect that really attracted me to this idea that got me to make these mattress sculptures. But also the fact that they can be kind of like formal and have a physical presence, but also sort of conjure up the idea of a body or like a person lying on them. There's something also urban to me about them. Like, you don't see mattresses in the country leaning on trees. And actually, this is the first of the mattress sculptures I made after I moved to Florida. It's kind of got like Florida colors, but then it's also sort of like a homage to great, painters that I admire, like Picasso and Jasper Johns. And so this was sort of the original version of the mattress balance on the bottle that is down in the entry lobby here. I was somewhat inspired by the lyric to Bob Dylan's song from Leopard Skin Pillbox Hat. It balances on your head like a mattress balances on a bottle of wine. And I'll end with this. This is the communal beard. It's also my first animation that I made back in. I started it in 2004. It was called What Visions Burn, and at the very end of this clip, which is 2 minutes, I think I have enough time for that. You'll see the very first animation sequence I did, where there's like a silhouette sort of cutting painting out of its frame. So yeah, this is a short excerpt from What Visions Burn. And how did I get it to play before? It's my friend Andy laughing. My technique has improved since then. This is the very what began it all. That's it. Thank you.
This is John Singer Sargent's Lady Agnew of Lochnow from 1892. It's probably one of my favorite paintings of all time, and I was lucky to have seen it in person while still a teenager in art school when it was part of a Sargent show at the Whitney Museum. Besides the bravura handling of her exquisite dress and violet sash, the way he has captured her gaze is sort of like a drawbridge that allows us to cross into the painting and go behind her perfect appearance into her soul. And for me, what I see there is a powerful, controlled, and perhaps slightly troubled person. This is my painting of Lady Agnew from 2009. I see this as the forerunner to my Socialite series, which is here. And that began about 5 years after this painting. By the way, I'm also super honored to be in this show. And it's the first time my work has been in a museum, and I couldn't be happier to have it here and with these other artists. This is Sargent's A Dinner Table at Night from 1884. It's an informal portrait of Sargent's patrons, Edith and Albert Vickers, at their Sussex home. And it may be that my desire to paint interiors began here. I was captivated by the glowing red lights and the gleaming silver. This is my red painting. It's Nancy in the Red Room of the White House from 2008. I often paint the same image multiple times because I know it will be different each time. This is the second version of that painting. And this is both of them in my studio. They're about 5 feet tall. I like seeing them side by side, and in fact, they were bought by one collector and he installed them side by side. I like the idea that they remain together. My next room in the White House was the yellow oval room, which was designed by Sister Parrish. She was the first interior designer brought in to help Jackie Kennedy decorate the White House. And apparently it's in this room in particular that you can see her influence. Around this time, I became deeply interested in the work of the great interior designers of the 20th century, like Billy Baldwin, Sister Parrish, and Albert Hadley. Sister Parrish especially sought to create rooms that were at once elegant and looked like they had been lived in for years, implying generational continuity and an aristocratic family seat, no matter how new the family, furniture, or money was. This is Billy Baldwin's Eastman living room from 2013. And this is Billy Baldwin's Broad Hollow. This painting is based on this image. When I saw those yellow drapes, I became obsessed with them. And so I painted it 3 times. This is Albert Hadley in his hallway. I'm so happy this is in the exhibition here because it's an important moment in the evolution of my work. I wanted to paint Albert Hadley's iconic red hallway, but I couldn't find an image of it without him standing in it. So I painted him as well, and I was struck by how the figure activates the space. And while I'm equally interested in the idea of an uninhabited room, at this point I knew I wanted to explore the figure in relation to their surroundings. I began to look for images of the type of rooms I was interested in, but this time with figures. I found Lee Radswell standing in a red room in a red Lanvin gown, photographed by Mark Shaw in 1962. Though I'm not sure why, she's actually standing in beauty mogul Helena Rubinstein's Paris apartment. Her gown is bleeding into her skin and down the floor. And that's when I started to see how the way that I paint can reveal a psychological aspect of the sitter. This is Lee Radswell and Nina Ricci. I loved painting the French furniture here. I also liked how the strange angle of the photo shot from above, as well as the furniture crowding in on her, lends Lee a touch of claustrophobia. Though I think it's important to mention that I'm not aware of these things when I paint the paintings. I sort of see what happens after I paint them. This is Consuelo Crespi. At this point, I became more and more interested in who these women were, and I studied them in depth, which I'm sure influenced the way I portrayed them. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about them. Consuelo was an American-born Italian countess and style setter and Vogue editor. Although she is the height of aristocratic elegance here and did have a profound role in promoting Italian fashion, she was born in the New York suburb of Larchmont and met Count Crespi on a blind date in a restaurant. It's not exactly rags to riches, but I love the idea that she invented herself as she went along. Slim Aarons photographed Lady Daphne Cameron on a tiger skin rug in the trophy room at socialite Laddie Sanford's Palm Beach home in 1959. I really wanted to paint that tiger. And I've done it about 3 times. This is CZ Guest. My images of CZ all come from a Slim Aarons shoot at her family home in Palm Beach, Villa Artemis. Born into the highest ranks of American society, she was a socialite, equestrian. In the early 50s, she was considered one of the best-dressed women in the world and was one of Truman Capote's swans. My impression of her is that she was anything but stuffy. In 1976, after a riding accident, she began writing a gardening column for the New York Post, and after battling cancer and losing her hair to chemotherapy, she sported a chic crew cut. She was even featured in a Nike ad wearing an upside-down sneaker on her head to suggest a mohawk, which I know that I've seen, but I cannot find an image of anywhere. Here she is with her 2 dogs, and I love her arm in this painting. It's sort of like, it looks like it's broken, that's bleeding into the building. She's sort of merging with the building. It was, this is CZ again. It was only towards the end of this painting this one that I felt CZ needed to be pushed into a stranger territory. So for me, the acid colors, along with the palm trees, give it a little morning in Vietnam feeling. This is Morella Agnelli in 1963, wearing Balenciaga in her garden at Villa La Leopolda on the Côte d'Azur. She had a tough life. No, she didn't really. Unlike Consuelo, Morella grew up in an aristocratic and conservative Italian family and married jet setter Gianni Agnelli, the owner of Fiat motor cars. Another of Capote's swans, one of several very close friends that he ultimately betrayed when he published a chapter from his novel, Unanswered Prayers, in Esquire magazine, revealing secrets they had all shared with him. That betrayal, along with several via her husband, must have deeply hurt her. Morella is known for the many gorgeous homes she poured herself into creating. I never decide beforehand what I want the bleeds to do in my painting. I thought it was revealing here how she ended up literally merging with and dissolving into the garden of her estate. This is Slim Keith, photographed by Louise Dahl Wolfe for Harper's Bazaar in the 1940s. Slim was the only one of Truman's swans who wasn't born into either wealth or society. Instead, she was a salty, beautiful, intelligent woman who came from a poor family in Northern California and fell into the Hollywood crowd when she left school and home to hang out in a desert resort, where she met 2 actors who nicknamed her Slim. She quickly became part of the Hearst Castle scene, where she spent time with the likes of Clark Gable and director Howard Hawks, whom she married. She's credited with discovering Lauren Bacall. She left Hawks for Hollywood agent Bill Hayward and was devastated when he left her for Pamela Churchill, who would become Pamela Harriman. Slim was a tough broad, great friends. Oops. How do I do this? Oh, I don't know how to do this. Anyway, she was great friends with Ernest Hemingway. And the thing about this painting is that the photo comes from is really strange. It appears that she's lighting a cigarette in a holder from a lighter, and in a holder from a lighter, but a closer look shows that the cigarette and holder have been painted in. It's hard to see here. And she's not holding a lighter, but a German emblem of some kind. I don't know what this was, I don't know what they were going for, and then someone thought, let's just make her smoking. This is my favorite image of Slim because it really captures her sharp style and knowing stance. It looks to me like she's in a lodge somewhere, and there must be other fabulous people just outside the picture milling about during cocktail hour. The way I painted her, her right elbow is not really leaning on anything, and it's just poised in the air, and I think it throws off her center of gravity in a way that I like. This is Babe Paley, photographed by Horst P. Horst in 1946. I think Babe Paley is the most tragic of the women and maybe the most revered as an icon. She and her two sisters were brought up to marry wealthy men. Her mother was specifically hoping for European royalty and to be perfect hostesses, and Babe took it seriously. I added the red at her mouth in a moment of inspiration in the studio. I just felt it needed something. Later, I learned that as a teenager, she had been in a terrible car accident and lost all her teeth. She had to wear a painful set of dentures for the rest of her life. On rare nights that her husband was home instead of with a mistress, she would wear them all night and then get up at 5 a.m. to have time to perfectly make up her face before Bill woke up. She is often described as looking and being perfect. Truman Capote, her dearest friend, who consoled her during her most painful moments while behind her back lining up new mistresses for her husband, also viciously betrayed her and her secrets in Esquire. She never spoke to him again. She died relatively young and after a long bout with lung cancer, and she also did that perfectly. She had made up her face the night before so as to look flawless at the end. This is also Babe, photographed for Vogue in 1946. As I painted Babe in this work, she seemed to me to have reached her max in terms of playing at perfection. She could no longer hold the center, and beginning with her head, pieces of her start to fly away. To me, these women were the last of their kind. After immersing myself in their lives, I was feeling pretty claustrophobic, and I next found myself turning to a different type of iconic woman. These new women were not socialites holding it all together. They had a different kind of celebrity. They were about rock and roll, and appearing perfect seemed to them to be really overrated. They were hanging out with Andy Warhol, Halston, and the Stones, and my next show then was titled The Girlfriends of the Rolling Stones, and felt like a natural segue from the Swans, whose days were on the wane. So I'll just show you a few of those. This is Bianca Jagger in yellow. This image is from a Sunday Times magazine shoot in 1972. Bianca is best known for having married Mick Jagger, being devastatingly stylish, and being a key part of the 1970s Studio 54 scene, along with Andy Warhol and Halston. I know that I would have been very intimidated by Bianca. The confidence that she exuded leaves me in awe. I love how this painting ended up giving her an almost cartoonish look, like an evil queen from a Disney movie. This is Anita Pallenberg from a Playmen magazine shoot in 1967. Pallenberg was an Italian actress, model, and fashion designer. In terms of her Rolling Stones liaisons, she was with Brian Jones from 67 to 69, which was followed by a long-term relationship with Keith Richards, with whom she had 3 children. She was much more than a groupie, though. Mick Jagger remixed several tracks on Beggar's Banquet after she offered criticism, and she's listed as singing background vocals on Sympathy for the Devil. Fun fact, she was obsessed with black magic and began to carry a string of garlic with her everywhere, even to bed, to ward off vampires. She also had a strange, mysterious old shaker for holy water, which she used for some of her rituals. Richard's bodyguard described her as having been like a life force, a woman so powerful, so full of strength and determination that men came to lean on her. And finally, this is Marianne Faithfull. Faithfull is an English singer, songwriter, and actress. She wrote As Tears Go By, famously recorded by her and Mick Jagger. She and Mick had a highly publicized relationship, though she's a rock and roll legend in her own right. Later in the 1970s, she struggled with heroin addiction, alcoholism, and anorexia. The image here is from the 1968 film The Girl on the Motorcycle, which starred Faithfull and French sex symbol Alain Delon. The plot description will give you a vivid idea of how different these women were from their predecessors. Okay. Newly married Rebecca leaves her husband's Alsatian bed on her prized motorbike, her symbol of freedom and escape, to visit Daniel, her lover in Heidelberg. En route, she indulges in psychedelic and erotic reveries as she relives her changing relationship with the two men before crashing into a truck at the end. It was a new world. That's all.